A very good morning to you, and thank you so much for joining us on Aso Morning this beautiful Monday. Thank you for joining us on the Monday edition of today's program. Well, as usual, we'll start with a newspaper review segment where we look at stories that made front page this morning, analyze those stories, and keep you abreast with what's going on around Nigeria so that you too can make your own informed opinion. After that will be our interview segment where we get to discuss trending national issues. And then today is Monday, so as you know, by 9 o'clock, we would have a by day with sustainability pause. As usual, she would be delving into sustainability, agriculture, environmental adaptability, and so much more. And after that would be agriculture for today and tomorrow. Remember, that's the segment that keeps you abreast with what's going on in the agricultural sector, telling you what you can do to join the innovations happening around agricultural sector, and so much more. And that would be our package. But we'll go for a short break. When we come back, it will be time for the newspaper review segment. So stay with us. We'll be right back.
The welfare of millions of people for generations to come may be affected by the wisdom which we here display. If Nigerian leaders and our British partners are to prove themselves worthy of their trust, now is the time for us solemnly and truly to dedicate ourselves to seeking the greatest good of the greatest number of our people in Nigeria. Independence for Nigeria in 1960 is imperative. But independence for Nigeria as a corporate entity is not enough. The peoples of Nigeria must at the same time be guaranteed their freedom. We must ensure that in an independent Nigeria, individual citizens throughout the land enjoy liberty, human dignity, and equality under the law. There must be one Nigeria with one constitution and one law for all. Let us therefore, Mr. Chairman, sir, close our ears to the counsel of despair, which says that we cannot here at this conference agree on a constitution. If there is any doubt among us as to what should be written into the constitution, let us, as Democrats that we profess ourselves to be, refer such problems, as the goal has done recently, to the people whom we profess to represent, either just before or at the federal elections late in 1959.
Welcome back from that break. It's time to go straight to the newspapers this morning, reading and analyzing what is in there. And we'll jumpstart the segment with the Leadership newspaper this morning. And the Leadership has here, federal government issues flood alert to 15 northern states. Federal government issues flood alert to 15 northern states. Now, this is almost expected every year around this time. We get this flood alert. I would expect there are mitigating factors or mitigation factors that the government would have put in place, not just the federal government, of course, but when meteorologists, the Nigerian Meteorological Agency, releases this at the beginning of the year, intermittently during the year, I actually expect that so much is being done to mitigate these. But I think the government, as it has become the case now, is bracing for response, emergency response, are looking for mattresses, rice and flour to share to affected people. It's like you are already expected. I would expect reinforced evacuation plans for the flash points or volatile or susceptible areas. but often that's not what the case is. I just hope that this time this flood alert would get state governments doing something just to mitigate it, get people ready, get farmers ready. If your property is along the lines that will be affected, please evacuate. Let's not lose any life. Let's reduce the number of properties that are lost. This is almost expected every 3-4 months, and yet nothing much is done. We had read in the papers some time ago that 28 states are going to be affected by flooding this year, and I think 300 and I can't remember the numbers exactly. Local governments across the country would be severely affected. But what are local government leadership or administration doing? What are governors around those states doing so that their people, it doesn't always come as a surprise? I expect town hall meetings. If you were campaigning, you would have reached these people. If you care so much for the lives and properties of these people, which by the way is your job, I expect town hall meetings. I expect town criers, if that still work in your community or constituency, as the case may be. I expect so much more in readiness of this flood that the meteorological agency keeps alerting us of. But that's what I expect. I hope we do better. Above the masthead of the leadership newspaper, it says Obasanjo library threatens legal action after EFCC arrested 93 at hotel. Well, to get to the details of that story is page 17 of the leadership newspaper. Beside that story is soaring energy costs push small businesses towards extinction. I've said that over and over again here on the platform. That is unfortunate when you hear the numbers of small businesses. By the way, that energizes our GDP. We have small businesses employing about 60-something%. Again, I cannot remember the numbers this morning, but a large number of our young people. The reason our unemployment rate is not worse than it is right now is because of the small businesses, the small nano businesses. And if we lose that, it's saying here that soaring energy cost is pushing small businesses further into extinction. I read a report recently that talked about the number of small businesses that go extinct in their first year. About 70% of businesses, startups, go extinct after the first year. 70%. And this is a sector that we should encourage to see the boom in our GDP, to see young people engaged. If you have to give incentives, maybe we'll get in the papers here. The federal government is trying to reach about 15 million people with what they call an enhanced social economic policy. I think it's the cash transfer that's going to be brought back. I don't know how I feel about cash transfers, but if you can energize the medium and small businesses in Nigeria, help them with the innovations. We have seen that Nigerians are really skilled, talented people. And if they can just have some sort of relief, we would do way better. But the headline here says soaring energy costs push small businesses towards extinction. That story is on page 4 of the leadership newspaper. Coming right below the masthead of that paper, it says heavy debt servicing deductions stifling state. Naiti warns. Heavy debt servicing deductions stifling state. Naiti warns. Says Kaduna, Ogun, Cross River, topmost affected state. I wish I could give you a short an excerpt of that story. It says the extractive industries transparency initiative, the Nigerian Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, that's NATI, has raised alarm over the heavy deductions for debt servicing from states' monthly allocation, warning that the deductions, which can reach up to 30%, are severely constraining the capacity of state governments to fund social service and critical infrastructure. According to NATI, This significant monthly deduction from state revenues constitutes a silent fiscal emergency that undermines economic stability and development at the state level, subnational level rather. The NATI has warned that the deductions to service loans is stifling. But of course, we don't need experts to tell us that when we keep borrowing, we would have to make payments. It's also commendable that this administration is doing something about servicing those loans, servicing, by the way, those loans. But it's also unfortunate too that when we do get these loans, it is not channeled in tangible infrastructures that would ultimately attract revenue for the country. I would expect, like every human being, what you don't take loans to feed, you don't take loans to pay salaries, you don't take loans. Even though that's not the case in some of these loan applications that the government pushes forward, we would expect that we would see tangible infrastructures. I want to see trains working. I want to see CNGs working. So to bring that energy back in our economy, if we had a networked train servicing, I should expect people would move easily, and goods and services would in turn naturally not be as high. The cost of goods and services would be reduced. That doesn't take rocket science to know, but we don't see tangible infrastructures, and that's why there's that distrust around loan application, which, by the way, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Countries around the world, even the US, is heavily indebted, but they are also good, credit worthy. Even though Nigerians will say, oh, we have not reached the benchmark, we are still credit worthy. I sometimes get weary. We are seeing this affect states. They mentioned Ogun State, Cross River State, and others that are most affected by the deductions that would naturally go into servicing the loans. Moving away from that story, Abbas leads presidential committee to mend cracks in Bauchi APC. Okay, a Dangote refinery receives CNG trucks for fuel distribution initiative. That's very, very commendable. We would no longer be using diesel. CNG is way cheaper, and if these trucks are going to be effectively distributing petrol across the country, it would tremendously affect the price of his commodities. Remember the healthy competition in the petroleum industry that I keep talking about here in this studio. I want to see healthy competition, and the other marketers can do same and say, you know what, in distribution of the product, whether you source it abroad or you patronize NNPCL or Dangote or whatever refinery you patronize it with, the cost of transportation is going to be knocked off significantly. So you too get into the fray of competition. You too go get CNG, which, by the way, is a cleaner way of moving. NYSC, Atiku, others disagree over core members service extension. NYSC, Atiku, others disagree over core members service extension. Fayemi denies joining ADC, okay, says he remains in APC. Fayemi denies joining the ADC, says he remains in APC. At the foot of that, NUC begins review of private varsity regulations. Okay, NUC begins review of private regulations. That's interesting. A lot of institutions have sprung up, some online and all that, and I had been calling on the NUC, please check this out so that people will not pay so much, and then you wake up one morning to say, oh, this one does not have this accreditation, and so the certification from those universities are null and void. It's like you keep quiet until Nigerians get attracted to these universities, and then you come up now. Let's review the regulations once again. Let's have universities that are licensed or certified to do that. Nigerians often are are very overwhelmed with or disillusioned when their words have to get to university. It is highly competitive. We do not have enough universities in Nigeria. That goes without saying, because I was affected. Even though I met the cutoff mark, there was so much competition. Those who found back doors to enter, those who found back doors, I say that with all my chest, because I know I got the cutoff mark, and this is affecting a lot of very bright young people across the country. Where you do get it, you sit back and tell yourself, oh, good thing I have passed WAEC, I have passed NICO, I have passed GCE, I have passed JAM, I have passed post-UME to whatever benchmark the university keeps, and you sit back and expect the ideal thing will happen. But then again, people who have less cutoff mark have brothers and uncles that are senators that could place a call and get opportunities, and you don't get it. So much has to be done to reform our education sector. But yes, the private universities has been succor to a lot of people, even though it's more expensive. But who is regulating? Are there strict regulations that ensures that our education standards are not to the floor, not reduced or not lowered, just because, oh, there's no other option for these individuals who find themselves not able to access federal universities? I support this move to review private varsity regulations, of course. With that, I move on now to the National Economy newspaper this morning. National Economy, taking us straight to the economy, says local production record less than 1% of annual vehicle import. Local production records less than 1% of annual vehicle import. We need more locally produced cars. Less than 1%. If 000 point something, that's how low the record is for local production of vehicles. We depend so largely on imports. But again, when we talk about, and that's a conversation I've had severally, when we discuss local content. Yeah, that's the phrase I'm trying to remember. Local content. I also have the fundamental issues that haven't been addressed of Nigerians not even trusting Nigerian-made products. When you go on the internet and listen to young people bash Innocent, for instance, and bash or local products, you shudder. Our leaders who should set the pace are receiving 200 million and above to go get certain cars, and they tell you to your face that, listen, we are getting cars that befit our person. You don't expect us to use cars that do not befit us. And you ask yourself, representative when Nami votes for cannot even use Nigerian-made products to set the pace and prove that, listen, you can do this. We can absolutely trust our locally produced vehicles. That largely affects the Nigerian product. Nigerians will rather, and then it's so expensive as well. When you have conversations with people who have tried, you see that locally made products are so expensive. But then again, would you blame them? There's one thing of being patriotic to your country, and there's another of saying, you know what, let me be practical. It costs me so much to get a bus in Nigeria, a Nigerian locally produced bus, than it is to import one. So you weigh it right, but we need to do more in incentivizing local manufacturers. There are a lot of them out there. They just need some sort of nudge, help in certain areas. We read just a couple of minutes ago how the energy situation and challenge we face in the country is affecting not just smallholder businesses, but all sorts of businesses. Imagine there is some incentive it would push patronage. So there's so much to discuss when we talk local content in Nigeria. But the writer here says manufacturers blame non-implementation of auto policy. Okay, that's that. Says 1 million vehicles imported annually despite improved local capacity. Again, the trust that I mentioned. Expert canvass introduction of $5 billion seed fund to drive localization. NAIDP needs political will to deliver results. That's coming from stakeholders. Above the masthead of the National Economy newspaper this morning, Nigeria loses $363 million annually over EU ban on beans export. EU ban on beans export. Remember the EU ban on beans export, where it was realized or it was noticed that Nigerians use chemicals that are harmful to preserve beans and ward off beetles and insects that often get into beans. We have several organic ways. There are innovations and several organic ways to preserve your beans. We spoke with an expert agricultural expert some time ago here on in the show, where he said that shouldn't be a problem for farmers, but awareness is lacking, and so we still have these issues. But that's a market that Nigeria could thrive at. But what are we saying export? These days I don't even encourage export, because we need local. We need to satisfy the local local consumption first. The prices are so high because a lot of people have gone into export. Actually, it's easier. People are coming into the Nigerian market and pushing so much out of the market, and so it's costing us largely. However, the potential is high, especially because we have arable land that farmers could cultivate. Again, that's another kettle of fish, where security issues is not allowing farmers to actually farm and thrive. So a lot is really wrong that we need to address first. Moving from that, insurance stock jump 10% after Tinubu signed reform bill. Insurance stock jumps 10% after Tinubu signed a reform bill. That's a good thing. And at the footer, the last story we'll be taking this morning says, easing track residents, a pathway to Nigeria's economic revival. And that's it. With that, we move on to the Vanguard newspaper. Sugar importation rises as local production falters. Unfortunate, still talking about importation and exportation of our products. Importation has risen because local production has faltered. Sugarcane farmers lament neglect access to sugar refineries. That's a sad one, but it's not doable. It is really it's not something that should affect the entire country's GDP as much as it is. Something must be done. Our Minister of Agriculture, stakeholders around agriculture need a sit down to address these issues. Above the masthead of the Vanguard newspaper, Peter Obi has integrity. He'll keep his one-time promise. MBF is saying Obasanjo Library kickers EFCC raids hotel. Looming strike. Federal government to pay 7 months arrears of doctors, health workers. Tariff slash. EERC moves to resolve Enugu power outage. Federal government fresh warnings. States mobilize against flooding. Please mobilize against flooding. Let's not record fatalities and loss of properties and injuries and all of that. Let's mobilize indeed against flooding. Niger Delta will support only Tinubu. Otuaru is saying. Moving away from that, we have here Tax Reform Act will cripple our operations in 48 hours. AON is saying. With that, we quickly move on now to the National Star newspaper. The National Star has here as its lead story, federal government MDAs cash strapped, can't meet contractual obligations. The writer here says AGF accused of deliberately refusing to release approved funds. Government activities in limbo, contractors abandoned project, workers lament plight. That story is on page 7 of the National Star newspaper, talking about the federal government MDA's cash strapped, can't meet contractual obligations. Knocks for NYSC for withholding Tinubu's critics certificate. Knocks for NYSC. Remember the young girl who had criticized the NYSC, and then it became another huge scandal where she released the audio of being threatened by an NYSC director, and afterwards here she is, after doing everything that's right, that according to her, her certificate has been withheld, and Nigerians are wondering how this can happen in a democracy where the only crime she committed was criticizing the welfare of corpers. She cried in that video, actually, where she was talking about how she had done everything right, and they proposed, is it proposed at this moment, or promised improved welfare was not there and all that. And here we go. It's very unfortunate. It's very unfortunate if indeed the NYSC is punishing her for speaking up, and that is why they are withholding their certificate. Young people are leaving the country with our talent and our skills. We are in one vein speaking about the treatment of young people, the fact that young people are moving out of the country. But look around you, you stifle them, and you make it even more difficult for them to thrive in the country. So let's do better. I think that's the only phrase these days that I just have. Let's do better. There's no reason why this girl's certificate will be withheld. If you can come with a good reason, please let us know. You can't say she oh, for crying out loud. Sometimes you look at things going on around Nigeria and you're almost you almost get despondent and disillusioned, and you ask yourself, is there even a way for your children? Are they going to have a better Nigeria? And I promise you, this isn't even from the presidency. This might just be some very overzealous director that wants to teach her a lesson, or wants to prove that they can exert power, and that's what's happening. But what message are you inadvertently sending in your bid to prove that you can withhold her certificate? Did she or did she not follow all the guidelines? Did she not appear when she was supposed to? Did she not complete effectively in her PPA? Let's have more information. It's unfortunate if that's the case. And at the footer of the National Star newspaper, protecting lives, property remain NAF's non-negotiable priority. That's coming from the Chief of Army Staff. Power outage, Ekiti issues BEDC 7 days ultimatum, threatens legal action. 24 bulk electricity consumers dump national grid. 24 bulk electricity consumers dump national grid. This is news I like to hear. Let's lessen the pressure on our national grid, and it is not even effective anyway. So, however, we have so much to celebrate. I had this conversation with some friends the other day, and they're like, are you kidding? We are happy we've not recorded another national grid. Last year, it was back to back. I guess there's something to celebrate, and that's what Nigerians are celebrating. We have not recorded a national grid shut down. I remember when it affected France and Singapore and some countries, a couple of, that was earlier in the year, where it affected, and they went livid, you know. But Nigerians have come to understand. I know a community in Abuja at the moment, and if anybody asks, chat me up privately, I will tell you, let's go petition AEDC. I know a community here in Abuja that for over almost a year now have not had electricity because transformer has a problem, and the community has to rally to get transformers. And when they finish rallying, it becomes the property of the AEDC. Before, the transformer had a problem, which, by the way, is vandalized. And I keep saying that you and I cannot go in there to vandalize. Very often, the people who can are people who are electricians and all of that. And when they do vandalize, where do they sell these things? AEDC is unable to give them electricity, give them transformers, a community, and you want a local, or rather small businesses to thrive. For almost a year in Abuja, in the city center here, a community has no electricity for 11 months. So yeah, if I can, I have thought about it. I wish I could go there and give them an alternative. I wish there were windmills I could get or solar solutions I could get. Yes, if I could, I would have. But that's it for the National Star. Quickly, we move to the last paper we'll be taking, and the lead here is expert differ on recommended SAC mental evaluation of value jet pilot. Expert differ on recommended SAC mental evaluation of value jet pilot. Remember, we had that conversation some time ago. Looming strike, we've taken that. Federal government placates health workers with 7 months arrears payment promise. 2.2 trillion naira, 2.2 trillion naira liquidation mop-up cuts banks deposit with CBN by 31.6%. With health certificate, we've taken that. NYC dismissed alleged political witch hunt. Okechukwu urges Tinubu to implement Ogbe's Green Imperative project in his memory. Remember, our former Minister of Agriculture passed away some time ago. So, federal government agri policies aimed at closing food deficit gap, Minister is saying. With that, we end today's edition of the newspaper review segment. We will go join Ebaide, who's standing by to give us the Sustainability Pulse segment. She's standing by, so stay tuned and watch what she's got to say today. We'll be back after that.
Good morning and welcome to another episode of Sustainability Pulse with Abide, your go-to station, your go-to platform for everything sustainable. How do we weigh and measure where we are as a continent, as a country? How do we drive conversations towards implementation? How do we ensure that each of us are held accountable and we're able to drive through our actions to a point where climate change will be a thing of the past? And while saving the environment, we are also doing, the ideal. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in as usual. On Monday, we had a critical conversation here on the future of work. What does it mean the future of work is green? What does it mean? What does it imply? What does it entail? What are the opportunities there? And we had a whole conversation around it. The opportunities we have, so while saving the environment, the opportunities to be pursued, their heights to be attained, and this is possible. It has been predicted that by 2030, AI will replace about 85 million jobs. Where does that leave me? Where does that leave you? And of course, while trying to cut emissions, there are actually a lot of things we can delve into as young people. A lot of jobs we can harness, a lot of jobs we can come up through innovation. And that's the whole idea of this conversation. To weigh and examine where we are as a people, as a continent, and where we are headed, and the way forward, obviously. And of course, beyond the conversations on the future of work and the opportunities that are bound, we did talk about, the tips. The tips we're used to giving, the tips we're used to having, and of course, the charge, the final charge from every episode. Thank you for tuning in again. Today is another Wednesday, and of course, we would have our short, climate news and updates to see where we are as a continent, as a country, and of course, where we are headed. It has been noted that last month, over 170 countries came together to discuss the plastic treaty. What does the plastic treaty, what's it all about? We have talked about it before on this station, on this particular platform. The plastic treaty will be that treaty that will guide the activities and production to the usage and of course the disposal of plastic. It is a document that will be holding countries accountable. So let's watch out, let's all look out and watch out for the plastic treaty as it comes on board. It's not finalized yet. Countries are still meeting, discussions are still ongoing. And of course, by September 8th to 10th, we will be having the Africa Climate Summit in Ethiopia, Addis Ababa. That would also bring to bear what leaders of the continent are speaking and are acting towards the whole idea of climate change. A lot is going on within the continent. A lot is going on within Nigeria. Currently, just last week, Thursday, we had the federal government reappoint a new Director General of the National Council of Climate Change Secretariat. So we have a new DG on board. So all of these things actually shows that the conversations, the thoughts around climate change is ongoing, and we all have to be part of the conversation. We all have to be part of this to know where we are as a country and where we are headed. Now, Africa continues to face severe climate challenges in 2025, and that's the truth. And the truth is, Africa faces urgencies of climate change, such as persistent droughts and deadly floods. This is something that we're not averse to. We are used to experiencing it. And it's been said that, of course, countries that are particularly affected are West and Central Africa. You would agree with me that here in Nigeria, it's something we constantly see all the time and experience. Flooding has become a menace. It has become something that we all dread. So once it rains, the next thing we're thinking in our heads, will be, there'll be flooding in some parts of Nigeria. It is alarming, and we need to do something about it. The average surface temperature across Africa in 2024 was approximately 0.86 degree above the 1991 to 1999 to 2022 long-term average VMO. Looking ahead, the second African Climate Summit, like I said before, it's happening in September. And of course, the leadership of the African continent would have to come together to discuss, what to do, where we are at, and of course, take this conversation to implementation seriously. Now, there's a growing discussion about accountability. Now, the UN top courts, has actually ruled that countries can now sue each other over the impacts of climate change. So you can imagine, as we are now as a country, we can actually sue China because of the impacts of climate change. Mind you, they're the highest emitters. that it hires emitters. And of course, like we have always said on this platform all the time, Africa combined as a continent has a very small portion of contribution really when it comes to climate change. We actually emit less than 4% of the world's emission. Africa as a continent, the entire 54 countries in Africa emits less, combined emits less than 4%. So it means that the conversations, are timely, they are urgent. So the top UN court has said, you know what, you can now sue a country, yes, over the impact of climate change. And of course, we're looking at the skills and talent challenges really. Companies are struggling with talent acquisition as only 29% of businesses anticipate improved talent availability between 2025 and 2030. And it's actually emerging that global AI jobs will be replacing 85 million jobs. Ladies and gentlemen, this should not be something that we would overlook. It shouldn't be something we should overlook. And so the future of work conversation continues. And when we are back, we would be having a guest here who will be talking about sharing her ideas and ideals of the future of work, what she's been into, and of course, the way forward. Please stay tuned. Do not go anywhere as this conversation is timely. You are a young person. You are African, living in Africa and working in Africa. Trust me, this conversation is for you. By 2030, AI would replace about 85 million jobs. That is scary. But what do we have to do? An upskilling, and evolving, a just transition. We need to be, fast-paced and not be left behind. So we're going to short break, and when we are back, we should have our guest here where the conversations around the future of work continues, and of course what our roles are as a people, as a government, as policymakers. The conversations have to continue. Please stay with us.
Africa stands at the front lines of the climate crisis. Over 600 million Africans still lack access to electricity. 1 in 3 face food insecurity due to climate-induced droughts and floods. By 2050, over 100 million people on the continent could be pushed into extreme poverty because of climate change. Plastic waste is piling, forests are vanishing, coastal cities are sinking. Yet, we are not powerless. Africa is also the youngest continent with 60% of its population under 25. We hold the energy, innovation, and drive to reshape the future. From solar-powered villages to bold climate tech, from green entrepreneurs to eco-warriors in slums and cities, the pulse of sustainability is rising. This is Sustainability Pulse with Ebaide, the show where truth meets urgency and action meets hope. Together, we decode the data, amplify the change makers, and reclaim Africa's future, one story at a time. This is not just a show, it is a movement. Welcome to the Pulse. Africa stands at the front lines of the climate crisis. Over 600 million Africans still lack access to electricity. 1 in 3 face food insecurity due to climate-induced droughts and floods. By 2050, over 100 million people on the continent could be pushed into extreme poverty because of climate change. Plastic waste is piling, forests are vanishing, coastal cities are sinking. Yet, we are not powerless. Africa is also the youngest continent with 60% of its population under 25. We hold the energy, innovation, and drive to reshape the future. From solar-powered villages to bold climate tech, from green entrepreneurs to eco-warriors in slums and cities, the pulse of sustainability is rising. This is Sustainability Pulse with Ebaide, the show where truth meets urgency and action meets hope. Together, we decode the data, amplify the change makers, and reclaim Africa's future, one story at a time. This is not just a show, it is a movement. Welcome to the Pulse. Africa stands at the front lines of the climate crisis. Over 600 million Africans still lack access to electricity. 1 in 3 face food insecurity due to climate-induced droughts and floods. By 2050, over 100 million people on the continent could be pushed into extreme poverty because of climate change. Plastic waste is piling, forests are vanishing, coastal cities are sinking. Yet, we are not powerless. Africa is also the youngest continent with 60% of its population under 25. We hold the energy, innovation, and drive to reshape the future. From solar-powered villages to bold climate tech, from green entrepreneurs to eco-warriors in slums and cities, the pulse of sustainability is rising. This is Sustainability Pulse with Ebaide, the show where truth meets urgency and action meets hope. Together, we decode the data, amplify the change makers, and reclaim Africa's future, one story at a time. This is not just a show, it is a movement. Welcome to the Pulse. Africa stands at the front lines of the climate crisis. Over 600 million Africans still lack access to electricity. 1 in 3 face food insecurity due to climate-induced.
Short break, and just before we left off, we talked about, you know, the transformation in the workplace, what the future of work is. We went through the climate news with regards to the continent, you know, where we are at, and of course, we also hinted about the African Climate Summit happening in September, and of course what leaders have to do, what African leaders have to discuss. You know, we also hinted on the plastic treaty, and I said that once we are back from the break, we do have a guest, a visionary leader, someone who has seen the future even before the conversations even started. She's been doing a lot of work around the future of work. She's taking it around the globe, and with me, ladies and gentlemen, is engineer Oluwakemi and Melody Abiola. She is a tri-sector strategist, renowned for her contributions to social development, ICT, and corporate relations. She served as Special Assistant on Youth, ICT, and Corporate Relations to Nigeria's Minister of Youth and Sports Development, and later as Special Assistant on New Media to the Minister of Communications. She founded Viva City Public Relations and Viva City Developments, addressing climate change, gender equality, and governance. A global speaker and author, she also leads the Kamath Foundation. A certified engineer, she continues to inspire change and, of course, earning accolades like the New Africa Global Honors Award. Ladies and gentlemen, so take us through the conversation, where we are at, and, of course, what she's doing, the tremendous work she's doing, and, of course, the words out to the government, to the policymakers, is no other person but engineer Oluwakemi and Melody Abiola. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for coming. So, I mean, because of time, let's just begin now. Now, let's begin with your big picture, really. You've been deeply involved in shaping these conversations around the future of work in Africa. I have met you beyond here in Nigeria, and of course, outside Nigeria. And this has become, you know, a talked about conversation driven by you. What would you say? You know, what excites you? What's your concern about these things, you know, you're driving at the moment?
I love the word you use, what excites me, because yes, at this point I am excited. I'm excited at the fact that, you know, when you birth a vision and you see it taking shape, it gives you that sense of excitement as well as pleasure. For me, the future of work, as at a year ago, was just a concept that we documented. But as at today, I think we've had about 6 events now on the future of work, as you said, globally. We've done America, I think 2 times, Azerbaijan, we'd had 2 events. Brazil, Abuja twice as well. And what we're doing is the first step in the program, which is to create awareness. And we believe now that that awareness is taking shape. Nigeria has tuned in to the conversation of what does the future of work hold for the Nigerian worker. One of the things I'm very big on is, let's not say the Nigerian youth. Even though, yes, youth is a great percentage of the workforce, but let's say the Nigerian workforce, because we want to talk about everybody up to the age of about, you know, 60, 65, whatever retirement age is, private sector, public sector. And even at some point, you even bring in retirees, because what happens to the retirees as well. And then, you know, we're also talking about the workplace in itself. Because as the future of work evolves for the workforce, it also evolves for the employer. So the employer needs to be tuned on or tuned in to, you know, these changes that are taking place. So at this point, we're very excited that the conversation has been met with open ears and open hearts and open brains. And as much as we've introduced the conversation, we can see that it's taking shape as people like yourself, have jumped on, do we call it a bandwagon, so to say, but have jumped on the movement and are helping us to amplify that movement. And that's stage one, which is awareness,
Absolutely.
awareness.
Absolutely. Thank you for that beautiful response. And that's the whole idea of this conversation, driving the conversation towards implementation. Now, let's talk about the current disconnect. I'm sure that from your conversations, the events you've held, from your own vantage point, there are skills gap, that you would want to put forward. The demands are there, So what's holding us back? I want you to amplify on, is it the policy, is it the education, is it investment or something? What's the skills gap? What's the disconnect you are amplifying?
For me personally, and I can only talk from a personal standpoint because I don't want to speak for government, I don't want to speak for public sector or for private sector. I'm going to speak from Kemi's perspective. And from my perspective, what I see as this particular gap is due to the lack of awareness.
Absolutely.
People cannot give you what they don't have. So for instance, we have a lot of organizations, and we've met a lot of organizations during our course of work that have said, this is the particular skill set that we require. And then, I had this conversation with someone the other day and then you've got, the average young person, and you ask them, say, what are you studying in university?
Yeah.
And they come up with a very funny course most of the time. And I ask, why are you studying that? And that's what they gave me. I don't quite understand, why did they give you what is not pertinent to your future? So number one, we need to look at the fact that don't take subjects that they give you. It's very important that you have your 2-year, 5-year, 10-year plan, and you're able to understand that. I also heard the other day someone saying that a lot of people are currently in universities globally, not just Nigeria, let's understand that are studying subjects that the jobs in those sectors will be obsolete by the time they enter the job market. So what we need to do first and foremost is there needs to be the understanding. The understanding from policymakers, private sector and public sector. There needs to be the understanding from the actual potential workers and employers. And then there needs to be the policy. The policy that says, as an institution, you must have XYZ courses in your syllabus. Then, we're also looking at the fact that let's not leave everything to degree courses. Because as much as myself and yourself studied, degree courses, I studied electronic and telecoms engineering, for instance, but that's not sort of where I 100% am at the moment. If I didn't study project management, I wouldn't be able to run, the social enterprise that I do run. So it's very important that, and we sang this song while I was in the Ministry of Youth, where you must have an added advantage.
Absolutely.
And what is that added advantage? That's that additional course that you add onto your foundation course. So we need to sort of like move into the short courses era where the short courses are accredited so that, we're talking an MVQ level 7, or, I don't really know what it's called over here, but we're talking those kind of courses where, you take this course to an MTN, a Goldman Sachs, wherever
it's relevant.
And it's relevant and recognized. So not just relevant, but recognized. So that's, there needs to be that awareness, there needs to be that synergy, and then that will drive policy.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. If you're listening, I'm sure that you are in awe. I mean, so am I, and I'm sure that a lot of people listening would say, this is new. I had cause to have a conversation with a friend on Sunday, when she was actually insisting that if a nephew should have a degree at least, for the basic. My point to her was no. It has been predicted that by 2030, AI would actually replace 84 million jobs. And that's no joke. And looking at your practical experience, you've been to a lot of places, you've organized a lot of events, you have also proffered some solution. I would want you to actually walk us through your experience and, of course, the solution on board.
So what we've garnered over the years is that, number one, and why, because people say, why do you have a lot of international events? And that's because we need to understand what's happening globally. Because it's a global space,
It is.
So once we're able to understand what's happening in other countries, we also need to understand that it is not a plug and play solution. It is an adapt before we adopt. So, Nigeria in itself is a peculiar nation. We're peculiar in our size, our population, our idiosyncrasies, so to speak. So how do we adapt some of the things that are being done globally.
Absolutely.
Before we're able to adopt them, to become our own. So that's number one, and that's why we continue to have these global conversations, because there's no point reinventing the wheel. The wheel already exists. Just add some extra spokes here and there to make it, work for an infant. So that's number one. We're looking at what's happening globally, and then we're looking at the fact that a lot of people are scared of AI. And you'll be scared of something that you don't understand. So that understanding is also key.
Very important, yeah.
And what I want to say that's so important about the future of work is that the future of work will not, let's say, take away jobs in totality.
Yeah.
But what it will do is evolve jobs. So the future of work should be considered to be an evolution of jobs.
Absolutely.
So it means that when 84 million jobs are being taken away, another, let's say, 168 million are being created. So what you just need to do is add those additional skills.
Yeah.
So for instance now, let's go to layman talks. You're a caterer. And AI is coming to sort of like, put food in tins and things like that. Then you need to understand process management. So it's no longer about what you knew before. It's an addition of what you knew before.
An addition.
Added, with that process management. Because, with process management, I remember, there must be only one error in sort of like 3,000 along a product line, so to speak, things like that. So what we need people to understand is that the future of work is the evolution of work. And it just means that as individuals, as a country, as organizations, we need to evolve.
The future of work is the evolution of work. I mean, that is so apt, and anyone listening can relate. I mean, you have broken it down, given examples, cited the future in itself, and was super proud of what you're doing. Now, I know that you have done a lot of things. You have, of course, highlighted key objectives and, of course, giving us perspectives. Now, just before we leave, we would want you, which we see very soon, by the way, you are faced with African leaders, you are faced with government of agencies, you are faced with these functionaries, and you need to ensure that you're able to, call to action these people. I mean, particularly, of course, the green and just transition areas, which, of course, aligns with your conversation. What will you be telling them? And of course, whilst you're looking at it, I know that you're also looking at other things you're doing. I know things are coming up in September, in October. You'd want to also share with us. So whilst you're faced with them, what will you be telling world leaders, African leaders, of course, the Nigerian government, policymakers? What will you tell them? Now, of course, I wanted to speak about briefly what you're constantly pursuing, and of course, calling all of us to be part of it.
Thank you so much. So before I begin, if you allow me to chip in, I wasn't born and raised in Nigeria.
Absolutely.
I moved over to Nigeria, I think about 11 years ago, and I'm not going anywhere. And that's because I love what I see here in Nigeria. I love the opportunities that are here. And I want our workforce, I won't hamper on young people alone, but the workforce in totality to see those things that I see. And for them to be able to see those things that I see, we need to amplify the potential that Nigeria has. I was speaking to a young man in my office yesterday, and he was telling me that, I want to do everything to travel out of the country. And by the time we had a 30-minute conversation, he said to me, I don't want to leave Nigeria. I see that there are so many opportunities.
Absolutely.
Here. So what we need to do is, how do we upskill the Nigerian workforce with the vision of this evolution of jobs to make it worthwhile for them while still domiciled over here?
Yeah.
And that's what we're calling on international partners to work with us on. So, the first event that you mentioned we're having in London at Imperial College, and we're speaking about the reduction of irregular migration. So, irregular migration because people are migrating in irregular patterns. How do we reduce it? We reduce it by letting them see the opportunities that are here and tap into the opportunities that are here. Because, what does it seem like if you're domiciled here in Nigeria, living here in Nigeria, but you're earning in foreign currency? It's amazing. So you can work remotely. You can work while you're here, but you need to have the skill sets and the accredited qualifications
Absolutely.
that are required globally.
Absolutely.
We'll still also be at the United Nations General Assembly like we normally do, and that conversation is with the global policymakers to see how we can adapt and adopt global policies, to work for Nigerians. So what is critical to us is these international conversations, match funding, you know, it's very important.
In the heart of our fields lies the future of agriculture, sustainable, innovative, and powered by smart solutions. From the rich soil of Africa to high-tech farms around the globe, agriculture is evolving to meet the demands of tomorrow. At the intersection of tradition and technology, we discover smarter ways to grow more, waste less, and harvest greater. Together, we are cultivating a future where every harvest sustains the earth and its people. Join us 9:30 a.m. Monday to Fridays on Aso TV, channel 392 DSTV, Star Times, channel 127, or YouTube live stream, GSA Initiative. Agriculture for today and tomorrow, as we share groundbreaking ideas, empowering farmers, and celebrate greener solutions. Together, let's grow the future. In the heart of our fields lies the future of agriculture, sustainable, innovative, and powered by smart solutions. From the rich soil of Africa to high-tech farms around the globe, agriculture is evolving to meet the demands of tomorrow. At the intersection of tradition and technology, we discover smarter ways to grow more, waste less, and harvest greener. Together, we are cultivating a future.
Welcome to Agriculture for Today and Tomorrow, where we promote smart solutions for greener harvest. I remain your host, Daniel Black, and remember, this is a Media for Agricultural Development project of GSAI. How has your weekend been? How has your day been? I hope you're starting on a very good note. So in our last episode, we introduced GMO, the very controversial GMO, which has gone into the trendy limelight, but we have also come to discover that GMO has been with us for quite a while now. It's not necessarily a new thing. It's just something that probably Nigeria is trying now to regulate and delve into. And I had promised we would be having like a series and expatiating. This series is to enlighten the populace on what GMO is. And then we hope that we will begin to have enlightened conversations, enlightened perspectives. I dare say that most of the perspectives I have seen on the internet recently about the GMO brouhaha is more of sentimental, most times stems out of limited knowledge, and there we now here in our Agriculture for Today and Tomorrow program, we decided to educate the populace to have more information about the GMO and then decide if they are actually pro or anti GMO. It's in the end lies in the people, lies in adaptability, adoption of this new technology. So last week we had actually defined and broken down what GMO is as genetically modified organisms prepared in the lab that get to solve a particular issue. Those organisms get to be given special genes, special traits to solve a particular issue. And we also discovered that GMO, it goes beyond agriculture. It's not just in agriculture. It goes into health. It goes into fitness. It goes into a whole lot of living things. But for this program, we are going to be focusing on agriculture. So today, we want to do an extensive analysis in the difference between GMO seeds and non-GMO seeds. This has been the bane of contention. Seeds that are genetically modified to have special traits that will give special advantage to such seeds, and then seeds that are not genetically modified, most times called hybrid or open pollinated varieties, that's the OPVs. Of course,
these are the seed varieties that are available for farmers, for agricultural stakeholders to use in the different value chains. The question is, what is the difference, and why is GMO causing so much rancor or so much attention, if you may put it that way? So we'll just start. Let's do a little recap on the meaning of GMO. So seeds whose DNA, that is their genetic structure, has been deliberately altered, intentionally altered, using modern biotechnology to express traits not naturally present in those species. So we have genes, we have seeds that traits, characteristics, features that are not naturally in them have been inserted into them. So we have seeds that probably normally produce maybe 2, 3, 4 times a year, will now produce 12 times a year. So that a seed multiplication, a fruit multiplication gene can be introduced into it. We can have genetically modified seeds that could actually, in fact, if you go into the extreme, and one of the things that have been caused for rancor, once genetically modified seeds go into mainstream, we can have one seed that is producing two fruits. We can have a seed that is producing orange and apple. That has not happened yet, but that is possible. I'm just giving you both the extremes. Seeds that will have special traits that are not available in other traits. Of course, these are things that have been done before. So genetically modified seeds are seeds whose DNA, genetic traits have been altered using modern biotechnology in the lab to give them some special skills and traits, as depending on how you. But non-GMO seeds actually they've not been altered genetically, they're through engineering, but they can also be altered through traditional hybriding or open pollinated varieties developed through natural breeding methods. So there are natural breeding methods that work over time, and introduction of these traits by virtue of the pollination, by virtue of where they are cultivated. Over time, this breeding can cause, like what people do in livestock, where they can cross one breed of livestock with another, a very different breed of livestock, and then they now have a crossbreed. That is the natural breeding technique that has been done to improve chances, but it's different from the GMO. The GMO in the lab, these traits are specifically introduced into these seeds or livestock eggs to ensure that it has these specific traits based on what is needed by whoever is producing it. In the difference also is in the process, like I've mentioned. GMOs are processed, are altered in labs, while non-GMO seeds use natural breeding process. It takes over time. They are planted, you select the best and ensure that you crossbreed the best to have, and then there is no direct transfer across unrelated species. You cannot be transferring gene from a pig to a cow. You cannot be transferring genes from maize to rice. You cannot be transferring some specific, because like in the last episode I mentioned cactus that is highly drought resistant and grows even in the desert. Genes of drought resistance can be removed from cactus and put into maize and put into rice, and you find out that the rice can now begin to grow even in the desert. That is the difference that we can be finding. So another difference that we will look at is the trait development. So targeted traits such as pest resistance, herbicide tolerance, and drought tolerance, improved nutrient profile can be introduced into GMO. So in GMOs, there are targeted traits. What are you looking for? You want to improve the nutrient profile of this crop. You want to make sure that it grows in the desert, or it grows where there is excess water. It can withstand excess water. You want to make sure that this particular pest that is prevalent, that disturbs this particular crop, it is now tolerant to those traits. Those traits can be sourced or synthesized in the lab and introduced into a GMO. But in non-GMO seeds, your hybrid and open poly OPVs, these traits developed through selective breeding for yield, for taste, adaptation to local conditions, and sometimes pest disease tolerance. But changes in non-GMOs occur over generations. Like we had mentioned, we'll have the first generation, the second generation, the third generation. So they are planted, you select the best seeds, the ones that survived that disease, and of course you plant them to multiply them. In the other case, the GMOs sit in the lab, do the multiplication, do the alterations, and within a space of months after research, you can have those alterations instanta. Right, so we are just getting to differentiate between, and like I keep reiterating, this show is not a show to say GMOs are good, GMOs are bad. This show is just to sensitize you, and then from the sensitization you're getting, you can now take an informed decision on your stand about GMOs. All right, so we also talk about yield and productivity. Oftentimes, GMO seeds often give higher yields under optimal conditions, especially where the targeted stressor is prevalent. So if you use a GMO seed, for example, a GMO seed that has had introduction of a particular pest prevalence, it will definitely do well. The pests will all be there. Let's say like maize, for example. Maize has army foreworm as one of its major pests. And imagine that you now have a GMO that has been altered to be resistant to army foreworm. Army foreworm cannot penetrate it, army foreworm cannot eat it, and all of that. In a place where there is prevalence of army foreworm, GMO seeds will definitely do higher as regards the other seeds, the hybrid seeds and the open pollinated varieties. So non-GMOs may produce competitive yields, especially when bred for local adaptability, but generally slower to respond to sudden large-scale threats. So yes, they will adapt, but they take time. GMOs adapt instantly, and they thrive, most times give better yields, give higher yields, especially when the issues are there. We'll be taking the fourth difference, and then we'll continue in the next episode to also talk about to still continue to analyze the difference between these. So in the seeds, right? Now, GMO may require specific paired inputs, e.g. certain herbicides, and have strict licensing. Some reduce pesticide but may increase herbicide use. So GMOs will come with strict instructions. If you're using this GMO, these are the pesticide you must use. You must source for this particular pesticide. If you use any other pesticide, this GMO will not work because of how it was genetically created in the lab. Meanwhile, non-GMO seeds are generally more flexible in input use. Most GMOs will work with fertilizers, herbicides, and different inputs. So farmers are not constrained, farmers are not restricted to a particular type of input. Of course, the management depends on local knowledge, crop rotation, and organic methods if desired. That's management of non-GMOs. But GMOs are highly skill specific, highly instruction, and highly input specific. So if you want to cultivate GMO seeds, you will have to stick to the conditions, just like you're buying a car and then they give you the instruction manual. Should you go against that instruction manual, of course your car will become faulty. Same thing will be happening with the GMOs. That's all we'll be able to take on today's episode of Agriculture for Today and Tomorrow. We are trying to demystify the concept of GMOs and give people a more informed stand on how to, on their perception and their adoption of the whole GMO seeds in the agricultural sector. Remember, I am Daniel Black. I remain your host here, and this is a Media for Agricultural Development project of GSAI. To continue this conversation, you can follow us on social media, on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, on YouTube. You can place other differences that you think you know or that you have identified, and we can continue the conversation there. See you in the next episode.
In the heart of our fields lies the future of agriculture, sustainable, innovative, and powered by smart solutions. From the rich soil of Africa to high-tech farms around the globe, agriculture is evolving to meet the demands of tomorrow. At the intersection of tradition and technology, we discover smarter ways to grow more, waste less, and harvest greener. Together, we are cultivating a future where every harvest sustains the earth and its people. Join us 9:30 a.m. Monday to Fridays on Aso TV, channel 392 DSTV, Star Times, channel 127, or YouTube live stream GSA Initiative. Agriculture for today and tomorrow, as we share groundbreaking ideas, empowering farmers